What up, everybody? I'm your host, JP. This is my co-host, Josh.
Hey, everyone.
And welcome back to another episode of the Film Bros podcast. All right, guys. So, another day, another week in the bag for you guys listening to this. It's coming out on Saturday, so I know you guys are going to be through with a whole week. Hopefully, you guys had a productive week, a great week. By the time we get there, I'm sure we're gonna have a great week. We're gonna go watch Return of the Jedi, right? We're gonna go visit a classic
for its anniversary.
Yeah, it's gonna be very nice. Gonna be getting tickets pretty soon. On today's episode, we're gonna go ahead and dive into part 2 of the Russo Brothers Peaks of Film School podcast. It's kind of what we did last week. We're gonna listen to a few snippets from Zack Snyder and Joe and Anthony Russo from their show on YouTube. If you guys want to check out the whole episode in its entirety, it's shorter than the first part. It's, a few minutes shorter, but a few interesting tidbits that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, Josh, on this episode, and you guys out there as well. If you guys want to discuss anything, if you guys want to listen to it, come back, talk to us about it. Well, we're happy to hear, right?
Exactly.
All the time. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. One more time, if you guys do want to see this episode, it is on YouTube. You guys can watch it in its entirety first, and not have like the most, I guess, the juicier part spoiled for you guys.
Yeah, basically.
With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in.
But real quick, before we get into the breakdown, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor, ZippyStream.
Today's episode is sponsored by ZippyStream. If you are wondering how we make money to run our podcast, it's all because of this innovative platform. Here at Film Bros Podcast, we absolutely love using ZippyStream. It's the easiest way to convert listeners into an email list, but best of all, they find us sponsorship so we can keep making money doing what we love.
Suppose you're also a podcaster thinking about starting one. ZippyStream will help you find and manage a relationship with brands that are relevant to your audience. If you want to learn more, contact us as soon as possible. Everyone that signs up this month will get to claim £10 as a joining bonus, which is around $12 or something like that.
Just reach out to us by email or social media DMs, and I'll put you in touch with the guys at ZippyStream right away. Now back to the pod. Basically kicking off where they left off in the last episode, and
is visionary director Zack Snyder. Do you ever have anyone that was intensely method on any of your projects?
Oscar Isaac's not intensely method, but like an amazing actor and really cool, but very liquid, very.
I try. I do. And all I ask for in return is just for respect.
And Oscar was great. He made me actually sort of appreciate the style of unpredictability a little bit,
Downey's like that a lot too. Downey doesn't like to do the same thing over and over. And in fact, he'll have multiple.
Be like, did you photograph that last one?
Yeah. He's a 3 or 4 taker, but he'll also, he has part of our process with him is we meet on a Sunday before the week of shooting, and then write alts to everything he's going to say. So that, each take he can look at the next alt and try something different, see if it leads him somewhere more interesting than the last take.
Oh, that is interesting.
And it's a great process because you get a lot of options in editorial, but nothing repeatable, so you're always dealing with. But, you go look at most Scorsese films and he's not paying a ton of attention to, when the cigar is in the mouth or not. He's cutting for performance,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
So, that's not something really to prioritize. With Downey, you're prioritizing the magic and not really, where he put the glass on the table each time. Yeah.
It was funny because I was listening to the Gucci panel. I was watching that, and Ridley was talking about this sort of 6-camera shooting, which I'm
He did
not,
6?
What? Yeah, which I'm not really, and how they would do a lot of times if they were doing a walk and talk, they would always land in 6 cameras. So like they have the 6 waiting. So like the real drama happens when you land, not in the walk-in. The walk-in's a 2-shot. no matter what.
Yeah.
And you land into 6 cameras, like 2 stacked close-ups, 2 stacked close-ups, 2 wide cameras,
Like a
you know,
medium
one and one low,
yeah,
one
yeah.
weird low one
Yeah.
that doesn't feel like a mistake.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's insane. That's intense.
And probably all great shots.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing that's really interesting is that you always imagine.
So right there, kind of talks about one of his earlier movies, which was Sucker Punch. Him working with Oscar Isaac. You know, basically talking about, you know, method actors and we touched up on this on a different episode. I don't think it was on part 1 of this interview, but you know, where not a lot of people like method actors, you know, and for this reason where you have to take multiple takes, right? Like how he was talking about Robert Downey Jr. He's a 4 or 5 take kind of guy, easy, you know what I mean? Because they have what's on the script, but they just go all over the place. And I'm sure it's good when it works out with the right actors, but then when it's like the ones that are like, hey, I can method, and it's like, calm down, Goofy. Just
read the lines, man.
Yeah, but say what's on the script, bro.
Yeah. We know it can get extreme. We've heard it before with Jared Leto being the most extreme case during Morbius or whatever, but it happens. And, you know, some of it does end up benefiting the movie.
Yeah.
Well, most people don't really do it. The ones that take that little, what is it, motivation or whatever it's called, to like incentive to do it. I think when it works out, it like helps the movie for the better.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you brought up Jared Leto's Joker because he's going to talk about him right now.
Well,
And
because, you know,
improv.
it allows you to have coverage for every version. They were talking about Jared Leto's performance, and Jared never does the same thing twice.
Right.
Really, Jared's pretty. Actually, now that you mention it, I forgot about my experience with Jared doing the Joker,
Yeah.
and it was amazing. But he had the script, but he really built the thing. Like he would go, and I'd say, "Oh, that was cool," but I'm not sure that one idea there. Could you bring that earlier? And he would do it, but it would then the end would be a little different. You know, it always kind of.
Right.
He'd always get there, to the end, but there'd be some
It's a journey.
little cul-de-sac that he
Right.
would get in and come back. But anyway, so
and it sucks to hear it from Zack Snyder himself because, you know, a lot of people, like how you said, a lot of people say that Jared Leto is the worst offender. You know, like he does a lot of crazy method acting that
He's
doesn't really.
He's just a little bit more extreme with it.
Yeah, and so hearing it from him, I'm kind of just like, man, that sucks because, you know, I liked him in the Suicide Squad. I kind of want to hear what David Ayer's experience with him is like now.
Yeah.
Now knowing how kind of he is behind the scenes. But yeah, hearing that from him saying that, you know, it took a few, and even him talking about it right now, it kind of sounded like he got frustrated. How, like, you know, he said it gets into a cul-de-sac and everything. It's like, that sounds frustrating as somebody who's trying to tell you, read the damn lines.
Like, and that's the thing, because with Jared Leto, you can tell that, like, well, you can't really tell what's improv, you know what I mean? I guess that's what makes a good actor, but when someone comes out behind the scenes and is like, oh no, yeah, he all improv that, you know what I mean? You can really, I think you can really look for it after the fact. And Jared Leto does seem to be the one to kind of go off strip.
He hits you as somebody like that, like,
like,
oh yeah,
like he gets lost in his performance or whatever, where he's just like, I'm gonna keep the ball rolling, but then the dude behind the camera is just gonna be like, hey man, like, you said the words perfectly the first time, I just dialed it back, you know what I mean? And then he'll be like, okay, but like, I feel like he'd be that type.
like, I'm just trying to imagine how it could be, and it's like he's probably like, oh yeah, you got me, Batman, and he's like, that's really good, maybe less of that, and then, you know, he probably raises his voice in this one. He's like, I really felt like this needed me to raise my voice, and you know, there's a talk back again. It's just,
Like,
it sounds frustrating. It sounds so frustrating.
I
And then
know.
I think he didn't you say that? I think you told me, but then I wound up finding out too, is that him and Ben Affleck, they weren't on the same
They're not
thing.
in
It
the
was just
same
him by
room.
himself.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Zach was reading the lines from like what Ben Affleck's trying to tell him, and then he's just right there like going all crazy. He's like, hey, with me.
You're not really Joker, man. Relax. And I'm like, I can imagine that it would be frustrating for that.
You know what? That gives a whole new meaning for that reach around line.
That's gross.
Like he was looking at Zack Snyder like, give me a reach around.
No, it does seem a little weird to, like, method acting as a whole is kind of like, you know, its own little science. Because people want to say like, yeah, I can do it and stuff, but I think there's a difference between method acting and then kind of taking your lines and just advancing. You know what I mean? Like fixing it up, like fixing up the language. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of saying like, oh, the chair sits there, you're like, the chair rests there. You know what I mean? Simple words like that.
Yeah.
Change them out. You know, make your character is supposed to be smart. You're gonna sound sophisticated. If your character is dumb, we're gonna make them sound stupid. You know what I mean? That's what I imagine. Most people are like
yeah.
I think that's what he meant with Oscar Isaac. Like, you could take the scene and make it your own, but the method acting is like a whole nother level. You know what I mean?
And it's interesting to see those things, but just to keep the ball rolling and moving on, this next little piece, he's gonna basically talk about film length. I know that we've spoken about it before. You know, is 4 hours, 3 hours becoming the new norm?
Yeah.
He's kind of gonna break down why he made Justice League that long and so on and so forth.
All right.
Like, I don't know if it's in the movie, but like just
That's your version of Post-it.
yeah, and
yeah.
everyone will be like, "Holy fuck, that is weird." Like, I don't know if it has anything to do with the movie, but
Right?
it's cool.
That's
But you
right.
know, and then like some kind of version of it will end up somewhere though sometimes. But every now and then you do need a little shot of electricity, you know, because everything will get.
You need
Once you kind of
inspiration.
line everything
Yeah.
up, you know, it's like we were talking about. I was, you know, the movie I'm working on now, and just this idea that sometimes when you talk about length, right, and say you have this idea, and they say, okay, what would it look like this? A lot of times you go, well, the 2-hour version of this, the exact 2-hour version of this, we know. Like, it won't take long for you to say, oh, I guess you're right. On page 15, they need to leave. On page 30, they're going to have to come back. You know what I mean? Like, depending on the size, it kind of starts to get written by the format a little bit, right?
Very much, yeah.
Like, you're like, oh, geez. Like, if I really compress this, there's no other way to get to the end unless all these things happen in a certain kind of very kind of structured format to get you there. I think that that's where the kind of, sometimes that little bolt of electricity or that little kind of,
Right.
even a thing that might not make it, but just gets you to have to think, you
Goes
know?
sideways,
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just kind of turn it on its ear a little bit, and you're like, oh, you're right. We have been kind of thinking about this one way for a while. And also, you know how sometimes you think about something one way for a while, and you kind of feel like it's done.
Yeah.
And then you might have to go back and look at it again. And it's sometimes that for me is uncomfortable, but also probably really necessary. You know, like I find that I sometimes have gone like, that was finished. Why are we cracking that open again?
Yeah.
And that's probably needs to get cracked open. That's why.
Even if you refine one or two key things about it without changing it essentially, you've just made an advancement.
Yeah.
You know, and it has to do, because it's all interconnected, right? A script is really, you lay it out linearly, right? It's just words and it's a structure, you know, and it follows a fairly predetermined format that's existed for almost 100 years at this point.
Yeah, we know. Yeah.
Right? So, you know, at a certain point, you touch something over here and it's going to affect something over here, and you got to calibrate those. And when you aren't, that's when you get into trouble.
The other thing you have to resist sometimes is like.
So, I think he's right about the length and the format. Obviously, when all that stuff was happening with Warner Brothers, you know, they said, hey, Justice League needs to be a two-hour movie, right? Fit that runtime, 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
Once you get to that 2-hour movie, you got to fit that box. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where I think that's why Zack Snyder's Justice League kind of hit pretty well over the theatrical run, not only because of the reshoots or whatever, you know, because some people actually enjoy that movie. Believe it or not. Some people actually enjoy the theatrical cut of Justice League, if you will. So, some people like nice, precise, hey, this is the structure or whatever, and some people like to go beyond that structure. And kind of like he was saying with the cameras, like likes to cover all around and cover his ass. The other director, that's kind of what Zack does. Maybe with less amount of cameras, he doesn't need 6, but he'll do that with 2, and get all this footage and make almost a 4-hour movie, but that is supposed to be unique and structured to something different. So it's not, such a generic superhero film, right? But then that's what they want. That they're like, this is what people are eating up. This is what they need to see. And unfortunately, it doesn't work out like that. Not these days. Not with Twitter, at least.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Which is yeah, because I think he said right before you cut it something about the studio being mad when you go over like that. But eventually you kind of have to be like, well, it has to be this long to to get in, to get to the end of the movie by this point. I think when cutting things out really fucks up movies. So you kind of, if the studio wants a 2-hour movie, there should be someone there to be like, hey, while you're doing all your stuff, make sure it's within this runtime. And then that's when you could be like, okay, well, maybe we don't need this, and that. When you don't really give them a range, you're kind of just like, go crazy, and then we'll catch up with you after the fact.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case when it comes to studios. I think studios know at this point how much a film's going to cost, right? So they're like, well, we want a 2-hour action flick. Statistics say this is what needs to happen at this amount of time, whatever. When it's a really generic movie, you can actually pick it out really, really well. But when it comes to these like complex movies that actually keep you on your toes and they actually do something different, you can tell that they didn't adhere to the format, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Zack Snyder does all the time. That's what he did a lot of the time. I think till this day, a lot of people are asking for a director's cut of, Sucker Punch, because they apparently that one was meddled with WB, because that was one of his earlier movies where, they had to make sure it was going to make money.
Yeah.
It became a cult classic after that. But and then now we're seeing, that these directors are getting more creative leeway. That's why we're seeing more 3-hour movies, and that's why I think that new Martin Scorsese movie with Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be almost 4 hours, but that's only because they got to make I think they say it in this episode a little bit. I think one of the Russo says it, but like they got to compete. They got to compete with with everything around it. Streaming, YouTube, all that stuff. Like we're such an entertainment age that 2-hour movies aren't just going to cut it anymore. Now, some people are going to be like, well, I can't sit 3 hours in a movie theater. I could do that at home. But it's like, no, if people get around to it and it becomes the norm, like, hey, if you're going to a movie theater, you know that you're going for an experience, a good 3 hours or something like that. I'm sure people will be on board.
They'll make the change.
Tell me you wouldn't sit through a Super Mario movie for 3 hours.
Maybe not Super Mario movie.
Oh, what? No.
Something else.
An iRobot remake with Jaden Smith
For 3 hours, Jesus.
Oh no.
No. Never pitch that idea again. He's making music. Let that boy stick to music.
Yeah, he has been. Some music's good for him. I'm not gonna lie.
No,
But yeah, so this length in movies, it's obviously become an issue, at least creatively, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to, kind of like you said, you got to be able to pick out. Maybe you can record all this and be like, well, yeah, we don't really need this, or whatever, pick those out. But some of the times, since they know what they want, they're like, you can't even film that. We're saving money. You can't even film that. If you film that, you're wasting money.
Yeah.
Just film these scenes. You know what I mean? And that's where creative freedom gets suffocated. And then that's when you get a generic movie once again.
I think, yeah, you're probably right about it then. A lot of runtime, and companies will be like, don't waste footage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't need this and that. Get rid of that shit. You know what I mean? So I guess it does make sense. And WB being broke sounds about right.
Right. They're like, whatever film, they're like, here, spend this, but I need the change.
And
Bring me the change.
it really kind of gets in the way of visionaries like Zach, because, you know, like I think he said it in the last one too, like, sometimes you need that extra thing just to get the point across. Like you need that extra scene with Superman or whatever, with Batman, just to explain like things in the movie.
And things that you can explain without necessarily saying. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like when you see Batman on the floor and then you just see him on the rooftop, you're just like, well, how did he goofily...
so fast?
But if you see him at least shoot a grapple gun, no words need to be said. That real quick, and then boom, he's on the roof. Okay, we know how he got up there. We can imagine. You know what I mean? But I don't know, man. It's just when it becomes, that's what I'm saying. Creativity gets smothered after a while, and then that's when you become a generic blockbuster.
I just think like, well, it's hard to not talk about him and WB because
that's how you become G.I. Joe: Rise of the Cobra.
Oh man, Jesus Christ, that movie. It just, you made me lose my train of thought. What the fuck? I was saying that it's hard to compare. It's hard not to compare him and what happened with WB. You know what I mean? Because it seems like
it's the most infamous one.
Yeah, you're just like, I can't remember a time where Marvel was having problems with cutting down people. You know what I mean? I felt like Jon Favreau and all those people knew like max they were doing is like 2 hours movies.
Well, I mean, if you want to be real, Scott Derrickson, he's kind of one that got his movie smothered to the point where they had to switch directors.
Ant-Man?
No, Multiverse of Madness.
Oh, okay,
yeah. Him, Edgar Wright, he was at least able to walk away, but they still kept the script, so it's kind of like whatever. I know James Gunn, when he got fired, they were going to still use his script, but not keep James Gunn, so that's another thing too. You know what I mean? That's, people fall victim to this. I just think Zack Snyder is just the most like public, because that spat was like big. Yeah. And not only did with that spat did Warner Brothers mess up their relationship with multiple creators, because even Christopher Nolan was like, I'm out of here.
Bye.
It also messed up with the revenue, right? Because now they're not even able to put out cohesive movies like they wanted to. It's basic, and I was thinking about this. I was like, man, it's basically like that monster universe that they were trying to take off with The Mummy, but DC's just like, I don't give a fuck how many times I get like shot down. I'm still coming at you guys. You know what I mean? Like they're not stopping. It's WB is just a completely interesting case, and hearing how far back, and I've been doing a lot of like research because, you know, I like to be informed on how bad of a track they've been on, and WB's been fucking up since back in 2006. So they've been on a hot streak. It's like one thing every single year. If you Google one thing a year from their history, they got some kind of scandal going on. They don't know how to breathe.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But moving on, we got Zach's about to discuss his process with reshoots and I believe green screen as well. How he deals with that.
Right, I'm saying it's not a me thing, I guess, here.
Yeah, because you go through the work in the script of reminding the reader that that's happening. Yeah, so it's like, again, it's reminding the viewer now that that's happening.
Cool. That's
you know,
good.
it's like, yeah.
What's your process like with reshoots? Because I've heard stories where you'll get people come over to the house and you just shoot things in the backyard.
I did that on
against the
Justice
green
League.
screen.
I had never really reshot anything. We did a reshoot on Sucker Punch that we didn't use.
Yeah.
I had never had a reshoot until Justice League. And that was really more about filling out some of the ideas from the original idea. And so there was a bunch of, and at that time it was, COVID had started and the studio was, we had a certain amount of money to do it, and there was no really reshoots in the budget. So I just was like, well, I'll just do it myself. Just have the guys come over and we'll just shoot something here in the yard. I did a fair amount of that. Wasn't like real scenes. It was just like little
pieces
here and there. Yeah.
Transitional pieces.
Yeah, I feel like you could do that. I've never had to do that, but it seems like a really easy with a small set up, you can
Yeah.
do a lot of that if you feel like.
Yeah, knock those things out. We love reshooting.
I know JJ does
Yeah.
that. He has like a
What little pickups?
little pickups like
yeah.
at
We
the-
we
at
built
the-
a small
yeah,
stage
exactly.
over here,
Oh, yeah.
next door, just next door.
Just for
yeah,
pickups,
just
yeah.
for that
Oh,
purpose.
see, that's cool. That's what I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you could a
Run
green
in.
screen and a thing. You could pretty get away with murder.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, especially in this day and age with the technology. It's interesting to see where we're going. I mean, we're really compelled by this notion of like using something like the Unreal Engine to generate our sets and shooting virtually.
Yeah.
And, it just gives you a lot of options. You don't have to travel. There's, you want 11 locations in the studio. It's not going to give you a budget to do that. Right, there you go. You can create it.
Yeah.
So you're in a way you're democratizing the craft because, some younger director who can't garner a larger budget, but has an ambition.
You can't shoot in the Vatican. And
Yes.
You're like, well,
Right.
if you go in there, the Vatican's in there.
It's in there, right? And it just, but it's an interesting. How do you
It's not
feel?
the Vatican, it's the Radican, because
That's
it's
right.
copyright infringement. It's very similar.
But how do you feel about that process? Like technology.
I think it's cool.
and-
I mean, for me, since 300, I've kind of been shooting that way a lot. I mean, you guys have ended up, I'm sure, in the last Avengers movies, with more green screen than you
than
thought.
actual,
Yeah,
There's
right?
more green screen than there is sets.
Sets,
Yeah.
right? So you're looking around going like, holy shit, is this who we are now?
Yeah.
Or were
Right,
these
right.
guys with no set?
Look at the tennis ball.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a monster.
Yeah.
The idea of this sort of virtual production that's really interesting is that it does come back around. The green screen environment is an exclusive world, right? Like there's not a lot of guys that can make a movie with no sets. Because as it is now, there's 1,000 visual effects artists between that green screen and it being in your movie.
That's right.
In the virtual production version, anybody who walks in there with a camera,
Can point it.
the desert is
Right.
there.
The
right?
environment,
And they can
yeah.
go and film it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, it demystifies visual effects a little bit.
Yeah.
It kind of, the thing that I've always found a little off-putting about a big green screen environment is it's not really engaging, for anybody, even for us, even for
Yeah.
the filmmakers. We know we've been looking at the concept. We know what it is. And the actors especially are like, I don't know where the hell I am. Like, I don't
Yeah.
I guess, okay, whatever you say, yes, I'll do it.
But for
I think-
camera operators too, right? It's
Yeah.
just like there's
I don't
nothing
know,
to grab
tilt up
onto.
to the
It's like-
mountain. What mountain?
Yeah, yeah, right. No, it's a little higher.
Yeah, exactly. It's a small mountain. Anyway,
But yeah, so
Reshoots.
yeah, so reshoots at it. Yeah, and you need to understand what he's saying too. He doesn't do a lot of reshoots because he shoots fucking everything. Okay, that's the thing, is that like like how he said, he never had to do reshoots, but he does multiple takes. So like I think like we said in the last on part 1 of this episode, is that he kind of fixes the path as he goes down it, so he doesn't have to come back around at the tail end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he'll shoot it 5 different ways and be like, okay, that fits like this, and then move on, shoot it 5 different ways, that fits like this. If he needs to go back, he has the extra take that says, all right, this is the better take for this scenario, whatever. So he, kind of does it. Not like how, the Russos kind of said, like, they plan for it, right? They already said, hey, we even have a booth over here just for, reshoots like that. We just need little touch-ups or whatever we need, right? Like, they know that they're going to need to do it, so they have that. I think they even said, too, that that they did a few scenes of the Gray Man in that studio. So it's like, some people plan ahead, some people are at the very end and they're just like, hey, we got to fix this. You know what I mean? And you can tell the difference in mentalities when it comes to reshoots right there.
For sure. I just think that I think reshoots in general are kind of weird. You know what I mean? Unless you're changing something drastic, I don't think they should be a thing. I think every director should strive to be like, this is really good. You know what I mean?
I think reshoots nowadays, in my opinion, just kind of stems down to like what studio says, if that makes sense. So like, I'm sure they send it in with it finished and they're like, hey, this is what I think it is, and they're like, it doesn't really work here. It doesn't really work here. And instead of renting out a whole studio, it's obviously cheaper to just have your own booth.
That's funny though. He did it in his own backyard. I always thought that shit was funny.
Yeah, he did. He was. I mean, it's true. And green screen.
And the MCU can afford to like have that green screen around. You know what I mean? So if you're just like, I need reshoots, the MCU is like, all right, make them quick, make them fucking quick, and then you stick them in a green screen and move on. But it's interesting how like you can do it with no budget, and then you can do it with like $1 million budget.
You can. It's crazy how like the use of green screen is different too. Like, you know, you like they were saying, you know, in the last 2 Avengers movies, with some of the green screen, it's kind of wonky, right? A couple scenes, not super. It's not like worst offender type shit like how it is with Marvel in Phase 4, but like you can tell, you know, some shit's wonky. Whereas, you know, some people know how to use it so well. Kind of how he was saying too, like. Some people know how to use it so well, but then some people don't know how to use it at all because there's no imagination from the director to the actors. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to just be like pretend something's here. You know, it's a difficult process. And how he said he's been doing it since 300, so that says a lot.
Yeah. See, so being technical and careful, shooting everything, and then being like, okay, well, I don't need this, and that, sounds a lot better than being. We'll shoot for now, and then if we need more, we'll come back. You know what I mean? That sounds like slow production. If I'll be for real.
Yeah, but I told you, the reshoots are just so common nowadays. It's built into the production at this point. They're like, oh yeah, you'll get $200 million for this movie, and then an extra $35 million for reshoots if you need to. You know, whatever, like basically, back pocket shit. Basically. And if you're working for WB, they're gonna be like, bring me back the change. I want the change back. I make sure. Don't skip out on the change, please.
The change.
Yeah, you know they need that motherfucking. So now this is where it kind of gets interesting because, you know, Zack Snyder's movies weren't profitable, this and that, but yet what he says next about BVS and director cuts in general. Let's listen.
2 of them I can do, you know.
Yeah.
It's like that, you know. It's like you guys know. It's like it's like there's a negotiation.
It's a push and pull. I mean, you spent hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah,
and,
it is a.
You know.
And by the way, and that's in some ways why for me the director's cut concept was a thing that at least I could be like, well, at least I know it will exist, you know. So that's fine.
Yeah.
Like Batman vs Superman, I think is a perfect example of there was no plan for a director's cut except for home video in the day. They would always come to me because those director's cuts, even like on Batman vs Superman, I don't it's some outrageous amount of the total after theatrical release was generated by the director's cut. It's like 80% of all the revenue came from the director's cut.
Yeah.
You know, and which is the thing that if you look at the spreadsheet for the movie, as a piece of business at the beginning of the endeavor, that line doesn't exist, right? And then in the end represents this massive amount of commerce for the film. So I don't know. So in that way, and Justice League, frankly, wouldn't exist if I hadn't really had that as the movie that I really wanted to make, you know. And I'm not saying that I'm trying to pull a fast one or, you know, it's a clever ruse.
Yeah.
It's just a teeny bit. Right. But like I always feel like, you know, sometimes I'm up against commerce, you know, and there's
a lot of strategy natural. As a filmmaker involved in getting your movie to a theater. You know, there's a lot of ownership that needs to happen along the way from a lot of people who wrote you a lot of big checks.
100%.
And so there's a management on the scale of movies that we do that extends beyond the work you're doing on the movie. And it was something we found with Marvel. We got better and better at with that as it went on.
Interesting.
Better and better at interacting with marketing in a certain way, or thinking through, or looking at what markets we needed in order for this movie to be successful. You know, who's going to India, you know, to talk to the Indian market. It's emerging now, and we're getting clips back from Infinity War showing how crazy audiences are going in theaters. We didn't go there for Infinity. We better go there for Endgame and, you know, interact with these fans that are emerging and want to feel like they're part of the big experience that's going on. This is sort of getting in a bigger context now and bigger questions of like the big.
Okay, so before he gets into this one's a good one because I feel like it's something that Zack Snyder did really well. But let's talk about how he, talked about the director's cut. He used BVS as an example where, the movie didn't do so well in theaters, but a good chunk of the revenue was made up because of the director's cut, 80%. Some may argue Zack Snyder's Justice League did the same thing, but I think, obviously Warner Brothers doesn't want to look like they got owned twice. You know what I mean? So they're not going to put the numbers out, which they never did. And hopefully one day we probably will hear, but today's not the day. I think director's cuts have always been beneficial. I think it really shows that, studios don't always know what they're doing. And what I mean by that is that, they have kind of like we were talking about that generic format, like, hey, make it 2 hours, structure. He said it himself, page 15 do this, page 30 you do that, whatever. They're so by the book that it's a problem. And you see that with what movies came out recently that had director's cuts? Total Recall, that the new one with Colin Farrell. Like, that one was dragged in the mud when it came out in theaters, but when the director's cut came out, it made more sense. Why? Because the creator's vision was realized. Same thing with the Chronicles of Riddick. Same thing with what other one? BVS. That's a good one. Obviously, a lot of director's cuts come out and are usually better. Alien 3, we seen that one. A lot of people say Alien 3 is a terrible movie, the theatrical cut, but if you guys see the director's cut, improves on it tenfold, and it's only because studios just want a structure and they feel like they can cut this and this out and they'll get it, but it's kind of like they saw the movie, so obviously you're gonna get it now that you take it out, you know what I mean? But the audience, will they?
I always thought it was more of like a courtesy thing, like, sorry your vision couldn't be fully made, here you go for the DVD,
and just put it on the DVD type shit.
And for Zach as well, like BVS, we missed out on 30 minutes. Same with the Suicide Squad, and then obviously Justice League. But I think it's different in the sense that that Justice League isn't really a direct. Okay, well, it's his cut for sure, but I think the circumstances are different. This wasn't a 30 minutes, we'll cut them out, and then you get your movie with the 30 minutes. This was a whole movie scrapped. You know what I mean? The circumstances were different. I just think director's cuts really go a long way, and not just for like, maybe like getting extra footage or whatever, but like horror movies benefit off of director's cuts quite often. I think we've had quite a few where like it isn't so much that it needs it for story, but good kills. You get good kills out of that you can't really, that you had to cut for time, basically.
Yeah.
So director's cuts can be beneficial not just for directors to really get their vision out there, but for the fans who are just like, well, yeah, show me those extra kills. Let me have those 30 minutes so that movie can make sense to me or whatever, in the terms of BVS and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's like a very like meet me halfway type thing. Like, yeah, sorry we have to cut it for runtime for movies and stuff, for movie theaters and stuff. Make it easier for the fans to digest, quote unquote. But you'll get it. People will understand.
You'll get your director's cut.
People will understand when they see it on DVD.
That should be in everybody's contract then. That should be a thing. It's like, hey, if we can't say, hey, this cut can make it to theaters because it's too edgy or too whatever, we can change it up, but we'll put your director's cut in the DVD for sure, every single time.
That would be nice. That way, just so fans can be like, well, I want to see what they had planned way before that. You know what I mean? Because a lot of movies benefit from that sort of thing. Like, yeah, like we can be content with movies that don't have that sort of thing, where you just like Iron Man or whatever the fuck, movies that are normal. I say normal, but they don't have the runtime or whatever. But while fans who were just like, well, yeah, I'd want to see Doctor Strange's, Multiverse of Madness with all those cameos that they said it was gonna have before cutting it down or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I wanted, like those things should exist. But I know at that point,
Wanda fight scene, that stunt coordinated fight scene. That
or the one where they said in the beginning she cut off what's his name's head, Baron Mordo's head, whatever the fuck his name was. Like that shit sounds cool, but I think at that point, I do understand that it has to be a budget issue. Like homie shot way more than he was supposed to, whatever. At that point, it's not a director's cut with like 30 minutes of extra footage. It's an hour, another hour or so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because Zack Snyder's Justice League added like 2 whole hours to that runtime instead of just 30 minutes. But like you said, that's a special case because they completely like destroyed that whole movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I always found director's cuts to be beneficial. It's always been. I never really realized it. I think the first time I realized it is when I watched the director's cut of a movie. I forgot what movie it was. But it was like on TV, like on FX or something. And I was like, this is not the movie I seen in theaters. And then I was like, why is it different, whatever. And I looked it up, and the director cuts and whatnot. There was a Donner cut of Superman 2. I wound up watching that. That was actually better than the one they put out in theaters back in way when.
Yeah, see?
And it's like, it is beneficial. I'm like, this how you know, like, this is not what the creator wanted. This is what the studio wanted.
If the studio can come out and compromise or not compromise, but just be like, hey man, just give us your full vision. You know what I mean? Like, granted, you shouldn't have a 5-hour movie at the end of everything. You should be under 3 hours, maybe 4, if you decide to push that envelope. You know what I mean? And then that's when you can start being like, all right, you got a little bit too carried away. But like I think every director should be allowed to like share their vision and not have it be chopped up by studio and stuff.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you're hiring a creator to make your movie, that's like, well, obviously they're about to get replaced with Chat GTP, but writers were Chat GTP. You know what I mean? Directors were Chat GTP. They're the ones with the visions. They're the one, the studio says, hey, we need to make an action movie. The directors and the writers are the ones who are going to be like, this is how you're going to make an action movie that's going to be great. So, for them to be so quick to be like, well, no, we know better and we know the audience better. It's like, yeah, you may know them at a statistic level, like, oh, yeah, they're going to like this or whatever, but they always forget that element of surprise. When something's new, when something's fresh, it doesn't matter if it's edgy or different. If it makes the jump, it makes a jump. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I think that's why movies that stream and stuff, and Scorsese, for example, because he's coming up on his like next movie that's gonna run over 4 hours or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think like Netflix, when The Irishman came out, that one's like 4 hours. I watched that. You know what I mean? I watched it when it came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, you could not sit through this in a movie theater.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that one does drag on. I don't know if you've seen it.
I got through half of it.
Yeah,
It wasn't really.
It does kind of drag on. You know what I mean? So, but I finished it. I finished it within those 4 hours, and I was like, okay, it does drag on. No one could sit through this movie and and like live. so it makes sense that Netflix or like streaming services would adopt that sort of thing, because you're not tied down by a studio or whatever. Like, yeah, you have your budget, work within the budget, but I think streaming services got the right idea to be like, yeah, we'll push your vision. You know what I mean?
And I think you're on the right track, because this next part is pretty lengthy. It's basically going to be most of the end. I'll pause it in between just so we can have that conversation in between, and I'll try to cut out the fat as much as I can. I did hear this prior, so... but you're basically on the money. They're going to talk about that a little bit, how Netflix is a different wave, and, how, visions can kind of be realized on those platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Business in general. Do you feel like there's 2 questions here, and then we'll wrap it up. One is, do you feel like there's 2 different film businesses? There's sort of the movies we all make, which are these large, popular movies. I tend to say that, like, our mission as filmmakers, because we grew up in a big Italian family where we told stories to each other on Sundays, is to be inclusive, and it's to create a sense of community. It's to bind people through storytelling.
Sure.
Something you put out into the world, and that millions of people, no matter what race, color, creed, what country they're from, level of poverty or wealth, right, can come together and experience a story in a very similar way and can cheer and laugh and cry and have this, this profound experience, hopefully, that sits with them the same way that Star Wars did for you and Star Wars and Empire did for us, and go down the list of movies. And then there feels like at times to me, and this is just somebody who, as a film fan, spent years watching movies, I feel like I grow out of stuff that feels a little bit like it's intentionally creating a barrier of entry, that there's an intellectual barrier of entry, or there's a artistic level of sophistication that also may create a barrier of entry. And I start now looking at things in a way where I go, well, is that communal and inclusive, or is that really intended for a niche audience that, it's supposed to make somebody feel better about themselves,
Sure.
and a collection of critics around it that, need to feel better about themselves. I mean, how do you feel looking at the business as a whole as an artist? Do you feel like you're working in one side of the business?
I've always...
All right, that was kind of a long-winded question, but he's basically asking about how do you include all your groups? How do you control that side of the business where where you're gonna market your movies? Put them here, and all that. I just wanted to clarify it just for people who probably got lost, or maybe if you got lost. And I just think it's hilarious because I'm watching them, and I'm like,
no one's eating the pizza.
No, okay. No, they were eating the pizza.
No, that's what I noticed. I was like, they kind of stopped eating that.
Oh, okay. Pizza. I was more thinking it's funny how Joe and Anthony's dynamic is, because it's funny how Joe is kind of like that talkative one, and if you look at Anthony, he's just he'll talk here and there, but he'll kind of look. I'm just that's kind of how me and you are. I'm the one who has the most to say, and I do the most, and then obviously you chime in, and he's been chiming in here and there too, but it's kind of just some good pizza. If you notice, Anthony was the one who was eating more pizza.
He's like, you guys aren't going to heaven.
Yeah,
I'm gonna fuck it up.
Exactly, and that's you. But yeah, let's keep listening to what Zach has to say.
That's really interesting. I haven't thought about it in those terms, and it's really interesting. I think about it. Because I'm a huge fan of myth, and I love mythology, and I believe mythology is relatable because it's collective, sort of archetypal experiences that people have anywhere in the world and have had for thousands of years. And so, the sort of Joseph Campbellian archetypes are a thing that I'm really have always been a huge fan of. And, how they're rendered, I tend not to be too critical of, but I know the difference between, something that's mythological and something that's maybe not as much, And I guess I fall naturally into sort of this, like I said, into this sort of mythological sort of filmmaking realm. Although I do think that my natural tendencies are kind of dark. I don't, And
you have a darker vision of mythology. You're attracted to Icarus. You're attracted to
100%.
What is the flaw in this mythology that makes it more complex?
Yeah, deconstruction is a thing that I'm a big fan of, because I think that it goes in a circle. When you deconstruct something, you actually figure out why it works. You know what I mean? It's just a thing that I've always been into. And so in that way, in a weird way, I've kind of battled my PG-13 roots, where I live, because what I ask for from the movies is budgets and scale.
It's got to justify.
It's got to, So it's got to, it needs this audience. And in a lot of ways, that's why I love Netflix, is because they, I kind of feel like with Netflix, the barrier is softer, what 13-year-old didn't watch Army of the Dead, probably zero.
It is softer because they can take their phone and go in the bathroom and,
it's 100%.
right, and hit play, and there's nobody there to stop them.
Yeah,
there's
when
no
I snuck
ticket
in
taker that can
Excalibur.
Can I see your ID?
Yeah, I was
right?
not supposed to see that movie.
Yeah.
I was 11 years old, but it was whoa, what happened? My brain.
But this leads to my last question, which.
So, kind of like what you said, and that's how he kind of, the way he makes it sound is that the reason why he likes Netflix a little bit more is because you can garner a wider audience, right? Whereas with WB, you know, you're garnering the audience that they want you to garner. You know what I mean? Like, and that's obviously the general audience. Whereas, you know, if you make a movie on Netflix that's rated R, you can garner not only the general audience, but, and maybe it's kind of evil to say, but little kids, you know what I mean? And then you can get the teenagers and the 20s, 30s, 40s. There's always going to be somebody in every single age range that's seen your movie on Netflix. You know what I mean? Whether it was by accident or on purpose. I don't know if you heard when, you know, Tom and Jerry was supposed to play, and then Zack Snyder's Justice League was actually playing over it or something. I think a week early before the premiere. Like that's how like it screwed up. So like some people watched it, or kids or whatever. And I think it's smart. I mean, is Zack a genius or an evil genius? I don't know. It seems a lot like that's what he's looking at. And yeah, you can, you know, jump from here to there, but if you're gonna take a liking more to Netflix because of, you know, the less of a barrier you have, it's kind of like taking the easy way in a way.
Honestly, yeah, because I mean, Netflix is one of those things where you could just, well, from what we hear, we're not obviously indoors with them, but like, if they don't want it to exist, it stops existing. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like you get pushback or anything like that. Maybe there is, and maybe we just don't hear that, because, you know, he could take it up to whoever and be like, hey, I want to make a movie about this. And then Netflix is usually pretty open about giving ideas and, you know, making movies and shit.
Yeah.
Which is really weird.
So like, you want to make that movie? Sure.
Make that fucking movie.
Go ahead.
Here you go. So like
180 mil? Oh.
Yeah, so like they are pretty open to the idea of making movies and like Netflix shit, like Netflix what originals. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. They're pretty open to that shit. So I would imagine he'd be free to be like that. Like, oh, you read this? You don't want me to change nothing? Like, and they're just like, no, bro, go ham. This ain't WB, dog. Like, do what you got to do. And he's just like, I'm gonna do what I got to do then.
Yeah,
and, you know, that's why he has the zombie franchise and he's making Rebel Moon. So like it sounds like he's having a field day at Netflix because he just does what he does.
Snyder's pitch to Netflix was Star Wars on steroids, and Netflix was just like, you son of a bitch, I'm in. So yeah, Netflix seems like a lot less resistant, a lot more, you know, benefits from it. You know what I mean? Because somebody's gonna watch a movie.
You still reach that audience.
Somebody's gonna watch it,
even if you pirate it. You know what I mean?
And you're gonna get the, like how you always say too, people that hate watch. You're gonna get those people too. You're gonna get those people. And to be honest, I don't know how long it takes for like Netflix to register you got a view or whatever, but if you do it more than a certain amount of time, you're putting money in his pocket regardless.
I'd imagine it counts up pretty fast because the way people hate watch Velma within weeks. After
it got a second week renewal.
Season. Yeah. So
who did that? I just want to talk. But that's
what I mean. So they got to be keeping track of that shit before they're like, you get your sequel. You know what I mean? Because I think it still works the same way as box office. Like you have to be a hit, but to also get a sequel on Netflix and like Hulu and whatever else. I think that's the same. I think that goes the same for anything.
But what is the standard for streaming? Right. That's the problem, you know, like what is the standard for streaming? Like with box office, you kind of know the standard because you're kind of just like, we put in this amount of money. This is as much as we need to get back to break even. But then this is as much as we're going to get if we actually produce something good. But with streaming, it's kind of like, this is the money that we're going to put in. But if you get the views, yeah. But did we make a profit? Did we not make a profit? Like it always seems like that's probably the issue, and they're gonna kind of talk about it a little bit here and kind of dive deeper. They're gonna be like their last question, and then we'll be wrapping up this episode. So,
which is sort of speaking of like Netflix, and we were talking about this before the cameras rolled, but disruption in the business, right? Do we feel like, and you're a technologist, do we feel like two-dimensional approach to filmmaking, this sort of projected approach, is going to be predominant in this century, or do we think that we're going to evolve into some other form of storytelling that's perhaps more immersive or some new technology? That has a better delivery system that's more impactful?
Well, we've all got, wired into our homes now.
Right.
I mean, already the pipe is laid, for that delivery system, regardless of what form it takes, in our lives.
Yeah.
We have it in our pocket, frankly. Yeah. That'll just be like how someone younger and smarter than me uses those tools. I don't know what that's going to be, but it's cool. When I'm like, super crusty, I'll be enjoying my Oculus goggles, going like, this is amazing. Well, maybe not. Maybe I'll still be grumpy. But I wish this was in a movie theater. Yeah. But yeah, I do think that in a weird way, those experiences are kind of diverging. The theatrical experience and the sort of
the things you can do at home.
Just like the kind of the we call it a movie, made for television, whatever, a movie that's only on Netflix, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then like a theatrical film that's in the theater, they're the same thing, but I feel like there's something's changing about how they're perceived. And I think that's just an evolution that is natural to having there be two distinct ways of watching a movie now. Like the pandemic kind of really
supercharged it, right?
Yeah. And so I think that, we'll see how that goes. But I love the theatrical experience. It's, you guys have made movies, the biggest movies ever made for the theater.
Right.
So
it'll be eventized, I think, moving forward. There's no question, right? Because you have to be able to find a reason to leave your home, right? You have to force the audience to find a reason to leave their home. We always say it's FOMO, right? It's sort of,
like everyone's going to what?
Yeah, or am I going to be part of the Twitter conversation? Am I going to be part of the social media conversation? Am I going to get the meme that comes out on a Saturday about the movie? Am I going to be able to participate in that? So unless you're creating that kind of content, it's really hard to justify leaving, the audience leaving their home to go see it and spend the money to go see it. They have cheaper options now. Everyone has 60-inch televisions. Right, like it's just
shut the lights off.
Yeah, or people have just become accustomed to watching things on their phone. It's just easier for them, I feel like it's we're definitely reaching that point where we might be like the last of a kind, and that there's going to be a new kind of. And I know you've got a lot of kids. I got a lot of kids. Yeah. I watch their habits, and I go, I don't know that I would be successful in their future, as a storyteller.
I don't. Yeah. Because we kind of, we've kind of forced the kids to watch our movies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean the ones we made, but the ones we like.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that they are like, okay,
That's what I would do. They're like, hey, watch this movie I made. Watch me be a genius. Honestly. Right. I'd be like, look at me. What the fuck? I made Superman die.
What if you're James Gunn with your kids?
Oh, no. I'd be like, you guys want to see Guardians? They'd be like, nah, I'm good. I'd be like, fair enough.
Scooby-Doo?
Scooby-Doo, okay. I don't watch Scooby-Doo.
Brightburn?
No.
You don't like Brightburn?
It's all right.
Oh, interesting. But yeah, so I think he's right. I think he's right on the money, but I think it's the wrong way to look at it, at least from what Joe was saying, his perspective. So they said that there's that split, right? You got streaming and box office. You got to figure out a way to make people want to come out to the box office to get that, you got to put out the kind of content people want to go to the movies for, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays, it's sad to say, it's not for a good movie, but it's for meme or
That rubbed me the wrong way too. The way he said that.
Some for one of those reasons, and it's like, so are you guys going into this filmmaking process like, I need to make content for the internet? Like, when you get a take and you look back at it, are you like,
you're like, oh, this will be a perfect meme?
Yeah, so it's gonna be in the movie because of that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Even though it's obviously stupid and can be looked at as pandering. You know what I mean? And I think that's a terrible way to look at it. And I think, you could already tell the difference between streaming television and box office television, right? You're not going to see an IMAX movie. Now you'll be able to see an IMAX movie a few months after, right? On Disney Plus or whatever.
After it's a successful or failure box office release.
Exactly. And I don't know if Netflix is doing those things. I think Disney Plus is the only one who's doing that. where they're giving out the IMAX version for free. So you can probably do that on Disney Plus, but everywhere else you're not allowed to. You can watch it at HDR 4 point whatever Dolby, basically in a movie theater at home if you have big TV. And who doesn't have a big TV nowadays? Yeah. So they can compete, but they can compete in the way where like spectacle, CGI on TV should not look like CGI that's in the movie. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm going to bring up The Flash again. And I kind of feel like that's the best way to kind of compare it, is that it seems like they're giving us TV graphics. You know what I mean? Like graphics that, you can find on like, Disney Plus or, a Netflix movie or show or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, that's not a movie going experience for me. I want to actually believe that is happening. The Batman, even though how grounded it was, like when he hit the bus and everything, like it looked fake for a second, right?
It looked like it was made of rubber.
Yeah.
For some reason.
And I was like, that takes you out of it. You know what I mean? They were doing so well. And it's like when you're going to a movie, you want to go into that movie and be like, yeah, CGI was flawless. I couldn't tell like things were bad, you know what I mean? Like it maybe there was this one bad scene, but it makes up for it because the rest of the movie looks solid, you know what I mean? And we're at a point. Maybe after the pandemic and everything, I think that's when quality actually started dropping, and I was assuming it's because of the VFX pipeline, but maybe it's just that what they're saying is that fine line is not even becoming a fine line, and it's kind of getting blurred, and they're like, well, it's going to end up on streaming eventually, and they're going to watch it on streaming eventually. So why would we shell out this much cash for, you know what I mean, for this big spectacle that they're probably just going to wait to watch at home anyways?
That's such a bad... I don't really like that whole argument. It sounds very bad because like you said, it's to look at it and be like, we got to get it on the internet as fast as possible. Like, no, like, people who watch movies should go watch movies because they like movies. They want the spectacle. They want the movie-going experience. This and that. Not because they want to understand a meme. That's so dumb. If I ever met a person like that, I'd probably hit him because there's no fucking way.
It's the guy from Fortnite.
Yeah, like I'd. Oh,
that's
man.
The equivalent. That's the equivalent.
I'd be so mad. Like, and I'm not saying like you can't have memes in your movies. I think the most famous meme going around is like the Spider-Man one where they're pointing at each other. Like, that's funny, you know what I mean? But you're not making the whole movie just to make that meme.
Well, if you notice, how many memes are being made out of movies today?
Quite a bit.
I mean, when it's lackluster movies, right? Like the ones that are meant to make fun of, like Morbius.
I think the ones that make...
Black Adam was being made fun of.
I think the ones that get that treatment most are animated movies.
Animated movies, right?
I think
that's
so.
Another thing, right? But a big chunk of the memes are coming from where? Older movies, serious movies that they take it out of context because it was a serious moment, and it's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, this is how I feel, or whatever. That Psycho meme, you know what I mean? Where they're like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, like that.
And they make the face.
All that stuff is coming from older movies. You know what I mean? All those memes, all the famous memes that I've noticed are from older movies.
Yeah.
Because older movies took themselves seriously. Nowadays, we're getting memes from, like, if we see something funny from those movies, you know what I mean? Like Black Adam, that the headshot with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson looking up, that one was a meme moment. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of another one that of recent memory, but that's usually how it is nowadays. They're not nitpicking serious movies that much. I think the recent one, I think I sent it to you on TikTok, is The Whale. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I think it said, like, after drinking cold Coke on a hot summer day, you see Brendan Fraser. Yeah. You gotta watch that. But like, it's not happening as often as before, and I think that's where, you can tell, like, people, if they don't take your movie seriously, if it's already being made fun of on its own, they don't want to make fun of it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when Eminem called himself B-Rabbit and said, like, hey, I already said everything in the book about myself. And everybody else is just like, well, you're already down in the dirt. Why am I gonna deal with you?
So I just think it all comes full circle that way. You know what I mean? Because, like, you're right. Like, now that you mention it, most memes come from like the funny moments in movies, not the serious moments. You know?
Yeah.
Things like that, and then it's just a very weird way to look at it like that. Like pandering to the internet for your movie to work. Like yeah, word of mouth works, but not in the sense of the meme that's gonna be famous in a month. Go see that movie. Like that doesn't work. And then I think streaming movies and like box office movies are clearly different. I think there's always been that differential, you know.
Yeah.
And then like I don't know what it is, but you can just tell. You can just be like, this is a
production is different.
Yeah,
Production is definitely different.
weird.
Even though like
they
they're
they get famous actors. But
Yeah.
it's still a streaming movie.
I don't know what it is because they put the same amount of money in it sometimes, and it's like theater movies look better than streaming movies, but
Yeah.
it's the same amount of money, so it's weird how that happens.
But you can still see the difference.
Kind of like that app. I don't know. Everybody's dragging it right now, but like the Apple TV one that ghosted with Chris Evans and Ana de Armas, like how bad it looks. And it's like that one was like almost a $200 million movie.
Yeah.
So how is it looking that bad? You know what I mean? That's the weird part. So how is the fine line getting blurred, but they're not producing the same thing?
Yeah, so
you know?
There's no way that's working. What kills the industry is when you send cinematic movies straight to streaming. That kills it for sure.
Yeah.
Like this movie was intended for the height of cinema, to be enjoyed by expensive popcorn and moviegoers, and you know that little unison kumbaya moment where you're sitting with everyone else, unless you're talking fuck you, but you know whatever else. Not if you take that and you're like, oh, we can let them watch it on TV, and then you're like, that you get to watch it with your family for one night, and then you're just like, oh, I'll watch it again eventually down the line. But it's not the same watching it
it's an experience
out of 32-inch versus a like silver screen, like they say. It's different. It's a different experience.
But
you should be going for the experience.
But that's the problem, is that the experience is being diminished because you can watch it on your cell phone now. And how he kind of said, you know, people are accustomed to that now. People would rather watch it on this than watch it on the big screen. And it's like,
I think that's a bigger issue.
I think it's an issue that was not only that happened. I'm thinking about it now, and it's like not only happened during the pandemic. It amplified because of the pandemic. Obviously, we were having an issue with our phones already.
Yes,
but you already knew where to go for things that you wanted. If you're gonna watch a movie, you're gonna watch it on in the movie theater. If you were late to it, you're watching it on Netflix.
Yeah.
And on a rainy day, boring day, you're watching an old movie on your cell phone. Basically. You know what I mean? You're not watching a brand new movie there because at least you had the courtesy, unless you were a monster, but you had the courtesy to watch it on TV. Yeah. Now, after the pandemic, it's kind of like after they started putting straight to box office movies to streaming, I think that was kind of like, in a way, for studios and stuff to dip their toe in and be like, can we feed them less and they'll still pay for it? And I think that's what happened. I think now they're like, okay, we'll make this. It'll be cheaper. It may not look as good, but people are still going to eat it up. You know what I mean? And then eventually, if it gets a sequel, that's when they up the money and stuff like that. So I think a lot of stuff, if you can get through the first season or the first movie or whatever, and it doesn't tickle your peach with the CGI, then they'll up it or whatever when it's a safer bet. But I think they're just becoming too safe.
I think streaming services also coined the game because they're the ones that, because Netflix never used to have any good movies. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was all old stuff. And, you know, some of it was good old stuff and some of it was just dumb, very old stuff. You know, before they started making their own originals where they were like, we can make cinematic movies like that too. But, you know, you're not producing them for cinema. Yeah. You're producing them for streaming. And there is a difference. I can't word it perfectly because I suck with talking, but I just think, like, there is a clear difference between something that you're meant to see on a silver screen and then something you're supposed to see on your TV screen.
You're 100% correct. But I think everybody should just,
Well, wait. I think. Hold on.
You got an epitome?
That just
epitome?
hit me. It just
Okay.
hit me. There are movies made for streaming that should be witnessed on the big screen. Like Prey. That one just hit my screen, my fucking head. I was like, well, wait a minute. You know, Prey should have been on the big screen.
But that's what I was telling you about the last time. That's where, studios, that's where they play it safe, right? Where they're like, we don't know if it's going to turn $1 in the box office, so those are the ones that we're going to put back to streaming.
Yeah.
But is it going to become that trend where, like, okay, it did really well on streaming, now we could promote it to box office? You know what I mean?
Well, isn't that already happening? Because we got Amazon dipping their toes in the movies too now.
But they're trying to bring their movies into the box office. They never would do that. They were just streaming movies. But that's what I'm saying is that now we're being conditioned to be like take mediocrity because we're getting these movies that are meant for streaming, straight to streaming movies, because you could tell the quality is different. And they're trying to make you pay for it at the box office. And if people suck it up, like, don't get me wrong, Air was probably going to be a good movie, but it was one of those Amazon originals that could have been straight to streaming.
On Amazon,
yeah. So, who knows? You know what I mean? Maybe Ben Affleck's the new movie that he's going to be in, Hypnotic, is going to be more cinematic because it's actually made for theaters. And I seen the trailer. It looks a little bit different than Air.
Pretty good.
And so... yeah, I think that's where, studios are trying to, like...
find the balance.
Have their cake and eat it too, in a way. You know what I mean?
And I don't think... most audiences, or, I mean, maybe general audiences might eat it up, depending on where you side with general audiences.
Not I.
Word?
I spot that shit out from a mile away.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm just saying, the person not looking that deep won't see it. But
ain't nothing general around here.
Don't do that again. But what do you call it? It's just... there is a difference, and there is those few silver linings where you're like, this movie would be very appreciated on the big screen, but studios are pussy sometimes, so they gotta take it to the little screen.
That's true.
But anyway, you ready to finish this up?
Yeah, I just want to wrap this up by giving the man his praises, and if you guys don't, watch this whole episode on your guys' own, at least you guys get to hear it here, and this is just coming from Anthony and Joe.
Fine, I'll watch it, but I don't know that they want to necessarily.
You never know. Give it some time, see where it goes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But look, we need to wrap up now.
Oh, okay.
But I just want to say in closing, one of my favorite things as a director is going to see a piece of cinema in whatever form it may be, and having two things happen to me is like, number one, I'm just blown away for some reason, and number two, I have no idea how it was done, how it was achieved, how it was made. And I had one of my favorite moments like that, and I don't have a lot of them, was when I went to see 300. And the visual texture and energy of that film just blew me away. And I just sat there and going, oh my God, I have no idea how he made this movie.
And then you get depressed because you walk out going, I don't know how to make that.
I know. So we spent probably after 300 came out. We spent a long time trying to figure out how you made that movie, and I'm grateful for today to hear a little bit more about
it's kind.
the process. So
well, thank you guys.
Zack Snyder knows how to do it. He's been doing it since he made 300. Green screen, good lighting. He just has he has that visionary vision. Like, he knows what he wants to put on the paper, and he knows what he wants to produce. And that's why his movies come out more. And that's why I feel like a lot of people are passionate about his movies in a way, too. Because I feel like his art translates to screen so well that people love that shit.
Yeah, he cares. He cares about his vision and preserving that shit.
Exactly. And I think that's why his fan base is so passionate, and that's why I think he garnered this following. And honestly, I don't know if it's official, don't quote me. I let these videos sit for a week already, and I've been looking at their other episodes, and it seems like this episode is doing numbers. So it says a lot when your following is willing to rack up numbers for you,
supporting
and do all that
you.
stuff. Yeah,
and that's why he's gonna bang a Netflix.
Yeah,
I think he mentioned it earlier about reaching a niche audience. Like, the Snyder fans are gonna watch all of this shit. You know what I mean? So he will be set. He's
set. He's good to go. Like, he's humbled. He knows what he's doing. He takes the time. A lot of people say Watchmen is one of the best comic book movies of all time. You know what I mean? The director's cut. And Zack Snyder's Justice League as well. You know, it sucks that he hasn't had that movie to crack the top 10 yet, but I feel like one day it will be his time. And I was thinking that, you know, honestly, if DC would have stayed the course, I think he would have had his, you know, $2 billion movie and been up there with the top 5.
And we wouldn't be getting a reboot with James Gunn.
But one of these days, I think if Rebel Moon does good and they make more spin-offs and Netflix says, hey, you know what, we are gonna actually dabble in this, I think box office might be coming his way. So I have to wait and see, right?
For sure.
Zack Snyder, everybody. Zack Snyder, everybody. Like I said, this is on Joe and Anthony Russo's AGBO channel on YouTube. If you guys want to watch the whole video in its entirety, shout out to them. Shout out to Zack Snyder doing his thing. If there's anything on this episode that we didn't talk about that you guys wanted us to talk about, maybe a piece in this video that we didn't listen to, and you guys should have been like, and you guys were probably yelling at the screen like, you should have fucking went to 25 minutes or something. I don't know. Any movies you guys want us to review, anything like that. If you guys just want to talk, interact with us. Josh, let them know where they can let us know.
Twitter, TikTok, Instagram at Film Bros Podcast. We post our new episodes are up. We just hit our 100th episode, so go check that out too. If you want to if you want to listen to us on the go, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or you can listen to that 100th episode, as I just mentioned. Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Film Bros Podcast. If you want to support us in a big way, Zippy Stream at Film Bros Podcast. All it takes is a name and an email. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube, go ahead and do that at Film Bros Podcast.
Yeah, and with that being said, have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you guys on the next one.
Talk to you guys later.